Welcome to this explainer. We are jumping right into an absolutely epic story today. We're talking about a leader granted a kingdom so vast, so incredibly unique, that there has been nothing like it before or since. This is the story of Prophet Sulaiman, or Nabi Allah Sulaiman, peace be upon him. We're going to explore exactly how a ruler managed unmatched, literally world-altering dominion without ever losing his spiritual grounding. Think about this for a second. A prophet who controlled the wind, commanded animals, and led even the jinn, yet remained the most humble servant of God. That right there is the central paradox of his life. I mean, we are talking about someone holding absolute, unrivaled earthly power, but pairing it with total, unwavering submission to his creator. How does someone wield the power of the very elements without letting it go to their head? Well, let's find out. Let's look at Section 1, the young judge and a wisdom beyond his years. To really understand the king, we've got to start with the boy. Picture the golden-hued ancient court of his father, King Daud. A pretty difficult case gets brought before him. Someone's sheep had strayed into another man's vineyard and completely ruined the crop. Daud's judgment? Just hand the sheep over to the vineyard owner as permanent compensation. Case closed, right? But young Suleiman steps in with a totally brilliant alternative. He says, wait, give the ruined vines to the sheep owner to restore, and give the sheep to the vine owner so he can profit from the milk and wool in the meantime. Then, once the vines are fully restored, trade them back. It's brilliant. This is pure restorative justice. It wasn't just about paying damages. It was about making both parties whole again. And listen, this wasn't just a kid being clever. The source text makes this super clear. It says, we made Suleiman understand it. God had specifically chosen him, granting him this profound insight that would literally become the bedrock of his entire reign. He was being prepped for something massive. Which brings us to Section 2. A kingdom of miracles, and command over the unseen. So when Suleiman inherits the throne, he doesn't just get a kingdom. He inherits a divine mission, backed by jaw-dropping miracles. The scale is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. God subjected the very elements of nature to his direct command. The winds were at his disposal, letting him travel a month's journey in a single morning and another month's journey by evening. He was given a flowing spring of molten brass, and his army, totally unprecedented. We're talking a massive coordinated workforce of powerful jinn and rebellious entities building immense palaces, statues, and gigantic boilers for him. It was an industrial and military powerhouse like the world had never seen. But here is the truly fascinating part. Contrast all that booming, supernatural energy with this one quiet, divine directive: work, House of Daud, in thankfulness. With all that unfathomable power at his fingertips, the ultimate purpose was simply gratitude. The power wasn't there to inflate his ego. It was just a tool for giving thanks. All right, Section 3, the Valley of Ants and the language of the small. A really crucial thing to understand about Suleiman is that his massive power never blinded him to the vulnerable. He was taught Lugat al-Tayr, the language of the birds and animals. So imagine the scene. Suleiman is riding out. He's got this terrifyingly large, heavily armored army of men, jinn, and birds literally darkening the sky. And as they march through the Valley of the Ants, Suleiman hears the tiniest of voices. An ant is urgently warning its tribe to hide so they don't get crushed by the troops. Think about that. He is walking with the weight of the entire world on his shoulders, yet he hears an ant. So how does an emperor react to that? You know, you'd expect the arrogance of a tyrant annoyed by the interruption. But no, he smiled. He stopped right there and made a prayer, thanking God for the blessing of understanding all creatures. It just goes to show you that empathy and supplication are the true marks of success. Moving to Section 4, the Queen and the Throne, a literal clash of empires. This is where the story takes a massive turn. Let's trace how this escalates. It all starts when his scout, the hoopoe bird, discovers a vast, super wealthy state ruled by the Queen of Sheba, or Bilqis. Now, despite being a highly intelligent society, they're prostrating to the sun instead of the creator. So, Suleiman sends this eloquent letter inviting them to the truth. The queen, who is clearly a very cautious and experienced ruler, decides to test him. She sends these ridiculously splendid gifts to see if he's just another earthly king looking for a bribe or a payout. But Suleiman, he flat out rejects it. He's like, keep your gold, I don't want your wealth, I want your spiritual awakening. And that rejection right there proves to the queen that she is dealing with a true prophet. So the queen decides to travel to Sulaiman to submit. Knowing she's on her way, Sulaiman sets up this incredibly theatrical demonstration of divine power. He turns to his extraordinary counsel and issues a seemingly impossible challenge. Who can bring me her massive, heavily guarded throne before she even gets here? The escalation of miracles here is just breathtaking. First, a powerful jinn steps up and offers to bring it before the meeting is even adjourned, basically before Sulaiman even stands up. But then, an individual described as having knowledge of the book steps up. He says, "I will bring it to you before your glance returns to you." And boom, in the literal blink of an eye, across an immense geographical distance, this massive ornate throne flashes into the hall, sitting right there in front of him. Now, if you or I teleported a throne in the blink of an eye, our egos would absolutely explode, right? But look at Solomon's reaction. He immediately says, "This is part of the bounty of my Lord in order to test me to see whether I will be thankful or ungrateful." He refuses to take the credit, even when he's commanding miracles that literally break the laws of physics. He views it merely as a spiritual test of his humility. Section 5, the Pavilion of Truth, and the Illusion of the World. So, Queen Bilqis arrives, and Sulaiman alters her throne slightly to test her perception. But he actually has a much deeper symbolic test waiting for her. He had his builders construct this magnificent pavilion with a floor made entirely of pristine, perfectly clear crystal glass, with actual water flowing right underneath it. As the queen approaches to enter, she looks down and is completely fooled. Thinking she's about to step into a pool of water, she physically lifts the hem of her dress so it won't get wet. Sulaiman gently corrects her, explaining that it's actually solid crystal. And in that moment of awe, everything just clicks for her. The glass veil falls from her eyes. She realizes that just as the shiny, clear floor had deceived her eyes into thinking it was water, her worship of the bright physical sun had totally deceived her soul into thinking it was the creator. Her vast intellect had failed her before, but right then and there, she instantly surrenders to Allah, the Lord of all being. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the humble servant and total submission. Wrapping up this explainer, Suleiman's life really is a masterclass in taslim, or total submission to God. Over the centuries, there have been these false historical traditions attributing sorcery, magic, and idol worship compromises to King Solomon. But the sources we're looking at today explicitly clear his name of all that. The text is crystal clear. The rebellious entities disbelieved and taught magic, but Solomon never disbelieved. He is remembered purely as an excellent penitent servant who stood absolutely firm in his faith. Which leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. If a king who possessed literally unimaginable wealth, a man who rode the winds, commanded supernatural beings, and spoke to the animals, if he found his true greatness and purpose only in bowing his head to his creator, where do we find ours? What exactly are we letting distract us today? Think on that. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking the truth.